Good evening, Scotland. Good evening, social media land. I hope you are well. It is Friday, the 22nd of November, 2024. Welcome to Saorsa Live. We're streaming across YouTube and TikTok tonight, so please do take the time to like and share across these platforms and say hello in the comments too. If we lose the live stream for any reason, please head to the other platform and we will continue broadcasting and you can still participate there in the chat. We are also recording tonight's live for the security and integrity of the stream, including the comments as well. So, why does Scotland, a nation rich in resources and potential, remain tethered to a union that thrives on its exploitation? We are told we're too small, too poor and too dependent when the facts scream the opposite. Decades of lies, buried truths and squandered wealth paint a picture not of partnership, but of plunder. From the hidden riches of the North Sea oil to the rigged economic narratives peddled by Westminster, Scotland's story is one of betrayal. A nation held back, its prosperity siphoned away, while those in power manipulate the truth to maintain their grip. What if everything you've been told about Scotland's place in the Union was a lie? What if the real question isn't whether Scotland can afford independence, but how much longer we can afford the Union? And that's what we'll be discussing tonight. But before we begin, as always, please listen and act upon this very important message. Start our lives with an important reminder that we are fighting one of the world's greatest propaganda machines, the British state and their right-wing oligarch-run media. To combat this, we ask that you always follow, like and share and comment positively across all social media platforms on any of your favourite Scottish independence creators and commentators. By doing this, you help to spread the word of our cause and manipulate social media algorithms to benefit our struggle. So please, for now, like and share this live stream, and if you haven't already, follow this account. Thank you. Listen, I keep playing that every start of every stream, and I can't emphasise enough the importance of liking and sharing all the independence creators' work, okay? This is how we win. We always can't be out on the streets marching. We can't be like sitting at stalls all the time. We can't be putting leaflets through doors all the time. We've got some incredible people that make incredible memes. Memes? Is that what they're called? Memes? Whatever they're called, right? Little pictures. Like Kareem does incredible stuff. All right. He puts it out. He puts it on our little channel, on our WhatsApp group. He puts it out across all the different Facebook pages. We need to share that stuff because it's constant and it's quick and it's relevant at that particular time. Okay. There's people like myself that'll make videos and I'll do a live stream and occasionally do memes. I also write quite a lot as well. Right. However, we're just two. There's hundreds of us out there. There's more people doing stuff all the time on Facebook, on Twitter, on Blue Sky. Blue Sky, what a glorious place, by the way. We'll come to that in a minute, by the way. Right? But it's so important. The more that we share, even if you think, I don't really want to put that on my Facebook page or my Twitter or anything like that. If you do, you just don't know who else might be inspired about this. This is how I feel about it all. I could make 1,000 videos, okay? We could have maybe 50 views on each video, but it might just take that one person that gets that spark of inspiration and goes, oh my God, this is the truth. This is about like Scottish independence, freeing our nation. And they become the next really super influential leader of independence and take us somewhere. While we're all busy shouting at each other about different sort of visions of how we get there, we're missing the opportunity to deliver an incredible message. And that is the positive message of what independence would be. But there you go. Anyway, let's have a quick look to see who is in the chit chat across. Let's have a look here. We have 11 people across in TikTok land on that screen, and over on my laptop here, we have 15 people. YouTube is beating TikTok tonight. What's going on? What's going on? Ridiculous. I never thought I'd see the day. But we've got, who was there? Ruth, listen, if you're still up, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out again. I know it's very late, but it's the only opportunity that I get to do these things is late at night when the kids are basically not here. The second youngest is playing games in his room just now. Says, you cannot come through between 11 and 12. So if you want a drink, get it now. He does not come for a drink. He's not. I'm going to come through at some point and ruin my flow. But there you go. So yeah, we've also got Neil, we've got John, Mark. I saw Dave was across there, but Dave was also across here. Kareem as well. Did you say that Anna Sarwar's got Politician of the Year 2024? What for? Being a lion we get. Wow. Incredible. The other thing I really want to say just now before we get into the meat and bones of tonight, okay, is a massive thank you to everybody in YouTube land. Last week we were just over about 600 subscribers in YouTube land. We're now sitting just under 660. I think it was 657 or 658 maybe. And we're getting a lot more views for the videos. And I've got to say, listen, I am so grateful, truly grateful that people that don't do the tick of talks are doing the tube of views instead. And we're getting there. So everybody across in YouTube land, give yourself a round of applause. Thank you for being incredible people, for sharing the work and doing what you do. I really appreciate it. Let's have a look. There's Striven. Hiya, Mark. Oh, Mark, thank you for coming tonight. I know it's late at night for you in TikTok land as well, but it's good to have you here. I really, really appreciate it, which is great. Right, let's get on with tonight's bit just now. So, where to begin? Let's play this little jingle first, okay?
It's so beautiful. I feel I can't even explain this.
You must stop this.
I can't. I won't.
You know what will happen.
You need to join me.
No one's gonna take me alive. The time has come to make things right. You and I must fight for our rights. You and I must fight to survive.
Imagine a government that claims to be your partner, your equal, your protector. Now imagine that same government discovering a wealth so vast it could transform your nation, lifting families out of poverty, rebuilding industries and securing futures. And instead of sharing this truth, they bury it, they lie to you. They take the wealth for themselves, all the while telling you that you're too poor, too weak and too dependent to stand on your own. Now this isn't fiction, this is exactly what Westminster did to Scotland in 1974. The McCrone Report proved that Scotland, with its North Sea oil, had the potential of becoming one of the richest countries in Europe. Yet both the Tories and Labour governments colluded to keep this truth hidden from you. But why? Why would they do that? Because if you'd known, you might have demanded independence. It might have sparked a little bit of like, wait a minute, that's ours. We could do things better. But instead, they buried your future. They robbed you of the right to decide what to do with your own resources. And they did it while pretending the union was a partnership. If that doesn't make your blood boil, ask yourself this. What kind of government hides prosperity from its own people just to keep them dependent? In 1974, Professor Gavin McCrone wrote a report showing the unmanageable economical benefits that the North Sea oil could bring to an independent Scotland. It said Scotland could have a budget surpluses so large that they would be embarrassing. Scotland's currency would become one of the strongest in Europe, and oil revenues would allow the nation to invest heavily in public services, infrastructure and industry. But this report didn't see the light of day until 2005, over 30 years later. Why? Because Westminster classified it as secret. Labour's Harold Wilson and his successors, including Jim Callaghan, suppressed it, terrified it would fuel the growing movement for independence. And while Scotland's people struggled through economic decline, Westminster took every drop of oil wealth for itself. Scotland didn't see investments in its roads, its railways, communities. It didn't see industries rebuilt. Instead, shipyards closed, steelworks fell silent, and communities across Scotland faced devastation and industrial collapse. Now, that might have been because they weren't fiscally economic, but there would be other things like just transitions or different ways of using our resources to help these people. So where the McCrone Report might sort of like say other things, where these particular businesses, these industries might not have been economical, we could have at least done something for our communities with that wealth. Meanwhile, Norway, discovering oil at the same time, used its wealth to build a sovereign fund that now supports its people with world-class public services and infrastructure. Norway prospered, Scotland stagnated. And why? Because Westminster treated Scotland like a resource to exploit, not a partner to uplift. Even today, the consequences of this betrayal are still felt. Scotland's infrastructure remains underfunded, our communities are still recovering from the destruction of key industries, and the benefits of oil wealth are nowhere to be found in our public services. This wasn't just economic mismanagement, it was just blatant theft. Theft of opportunity, wealth and self-determination. The McCrone Report was more than a document, it was a confession that Westminster knew Scotland would have thrived, but chose to keep us in the dark, dependent and powerless. How much more proof do we need that this union is built on exploitation? Westminster didn't just steal our wealth, they stole our future. They fed us lies, telling us we were too small and too poor to make it on our own, while they took everything they could. And to any Scot still defending this union, ask yourself, how much more betrayal are you willing to accept? How many more lies will you swallow before you realise the truth? Westminster governs for itself, not for Scotland. And if we don't break free, this cycle of exploitation will never end. Scotland deserves better, and it's time that we started thinking that way.
Westminster sold Scotland a lie. They claimed partnership while exploiting our resources, hiding the truth, and keeping us dependent. The McCrone Report, buried for over 30 years, proved that Scotland's North Sea oil could have made us one of Europe's richest nations, with surpluses so vast they'd be embarrassing. Yet this wealth was stolen, our industries left to collapse, and our communities denied the investment they desperately needed. And meanwhile, Norway, discovering oil at the same time, built a sovereign fund that transformed its future. Scotland could have thrived, but Westminster kept us in the dark to protect their interests. This wasn't just mismanagement. It was theft, a deliberate act of betrayal. They took our wealth, fed us lies, and told us we were too small to stand alone. How many more lies must we endure before we reclaim our future? Is this the union we deserve?
Here we go, Mike's back on again. Oh, the reason I put these jingles on is because between little segments I have to have a wee drink from talking so much, which is crazy. Interesting conversation going on across in YouTube land. Mark, listen, I appreciate your comments and things like that. Don't appreciate being called a lying wee git. That's not very polite. I've always been polite to you. There is no reason for you to turn around and be like that. But, you know, what you're saying and what other people are saying there as well. Mad Monk said something very cool there. It's good that Mark Nelson is educating us and telling us that we are too small, too poor and too stupid to run our own country. Thanks, Mark. We're not, are we? We're not too wee, too stupid. Do we really need to have Westminster making decisions for us? We had all our own resources, all our own money. Last year it was, 87.5 billion that we could calculate that was sent down to Westminster. That's something, you know? And then we got 41 billion back for devolved, 30 billion spent on various other things on our behalf. That still left about 15 billion left. Then, you know, loans are taken out and part of that loan is attributed to us. £22 billion deficit made by another country on things that they didn't spend on us. That old lawnmower analogy again. I told that to my daughter. Anyway, right, let's get on with segment 2. Okay. Why does Scotland tolerate this? Why should a nation of immense resources and incredible potential remain shackled to a union that leaves its pensioners to freeze, its families to starve, and its children to struggle in overcrowded classrooms? Listen, before I continue just now, we're in the 21st century. We've got food banks in this country. I think, I was speaking to my mum and she was born just after the Second World War and she grew up at the tail end of rationing. And my grandmother and my grandfather talked about rationing. And she said that rationing was actually better than some of these poor people that have to go to food banks. Can you believe that? That's embarrassing. You know, we've got money to give missiles to other countries to fire at other countries, but we don't have the money to feed and look after our own people. Nah. Anyway, sorry. Every decision from Westminster is a glaring reminder of Scotland's subjugation, a union that prioritises English needs while exploiting Scotland's wealth, land and people. This winter, Scotland's pensioners will face the cold, abandoned by policies dictated in London. The winter fuel payment, once a universal benefit, has been stripped to a cruel, means-tested system, cutting off critical support for many of our elderly. On top of this, there's that debacle of the TV licences for the over 75s that have been scrapped, further punishing pensioners who are already endure limited incomes. Incidentally, just stick your hand up if you still pay the licence fee. I will look for hands going up in the chat as we go along. Alright? Anyway, Why does Westminster do this? Because Westminster's policies are designed to serve English priorities, leaving Scots to bear the costs of decisions made far away. This isn't a partnership, this is exploitation. Scotland's devolved powers, hailed as a solution, are no solution at all. The Barnett formula binds Scotland's funding to England's public service spending decisions. When Westminster slashes budget south of the border, Scotland's share is cut too. That is the point of the Barnett formula. It's there to make parity. The result is a government in Holyrood forced to do more with less, while ordinary Scots, pensioners, nurses, teachers are left paying the price. Public sector disputes reveal the brutal reality of this arrangement. While Scotland managed to prevent major strikes by offering better pay to workers, those pay rises were funded not by new resources, but by taking from other essential services. Because every pound spent in Scotland must first pass through Westminster's hands, we are always robbed of the ability to truly prioritise the needs of our people. And now, the Labour government has dealt another blow by increasing national insurance contributions, forcing public sector employers in Scotland to pay millions back to Westminster. Excuse me. This is a stealth tax on Scotland, one that siphons funds away from education, healthcare and communities. And remember that the national insurance that we pay is collected by the Treasury and Westminster. It's not collected and spent in Scotland. It just goes into that big pot. Consider this as well, right? See the public sector national insurance. That's actually paid by the Scottish Government. And it's looking to be about £300 million minimum. That's a lot of money. Consider our local councils, the lifeline of our towns and villages. Starved of adequate funding, they've been forced to close libraries, abandon community centres and neglect public spaces. The damage falls hardest on rural and disadvantaged areas where these services are often the only support available. This deliberate starvation of resources echoes through our healthcare system. Despite Scotland's best efforts to protect the NHS, the funding we receive is dictated by Westminster's austerity agenda. Cuts to NHS England means reduced budgets here, leaving NHS Scotland struggling to meet demands. Mental health services, already stretched thin, have become a crisis point, and with Scots unable to access timely or adequate care. If this wasn't enough, Westminster's reserves control over welfare benefits, gutting the safety net for Scotland's most vulnerable. Universal credit cuts have pushed families to food banks, while housing benefit reductions have driven many into homelessness. And before anybody says, yes, housing is a devolved power, but housing benefit, even though it's administered and put out there by local councils, it is provided by Westminster as part of it all. They manage the money. Even Scotland's achievements in building affordable housing are undermined by Westminster's policies, leaving Scots in a precarious living situations despite our government's best efforts. The story is always the same. Scotland fights to protect its people, but the Union forces us into compromises and constraints. How long will we let this exploitation continue? How can any Scot defend a system that forces pensioners to freeze, families to starve, and children to suffer? The Union is not failing Scotland by accident. It's designed to benefit England at our expense. The longer we remain, the more we lose our dignity, our resources, and our future. Independence is not an aspiration. It's a necessity. We owe it to ourselves and to the future of Scotland and all of our future generations to break free from this union that steals from us and shames us. So why are there still Scots willing to defend this? Why are there Scots who look at the suffering of their own people and think, this is good enough? It's not good enough. Scotland deserves better. I keep saying this. And this is not going to stop until we're free.
Why does Scotland continue to endure a union that prioritizes English interests while leaving our pensioners cold, our families hungry, and our public services crumbling? Westminster's policies dictate our budgets, stripping us of resources and forcing Holyrood to make impossible choices. From cutting winter fuel payments to scrapping free TV licenses for over 75s, they abandon the most vulnerable in our society. Local councils are starved of funds. Libraries close, community centres vanish, and vital healthcare services buckle under austerity-driven cuts. Even Scotland's welfare system, housing, and achievements in renewable energy are undermined by decisions made far away in London. This isn't mismanagement, it's exploitation. Independence is no longer just an aspiration, it's a necessity for survival. How much longer will Scots accept a system that robs us of dignity, resources, and a future? Is this truly the legacy we want to leave for generations to come?
Sorry, I'm busy reading what's going on in YouTube land. It's a lot of people there tonight. Thank you everybody for joining us. I really appreciate that big time. TikTok land. There's more in YouTube than there is in TikTok land. Get sharing, get liking, get more people coming in. Let's see if we can get, we're talking 18 or 19 people across in YouTube land. That doesn't sound like a lot, right? But I said to a friend of mine at work, Scottish politics, right, okay, is in the vast ocean that is YouTube and TikTok. Scottish politics is like a cup full of water in that vast ocean, right? And then the independence movement within that cup is probably just a tiny little thimble, okay, of liquid from that. And then the stuff that I do is like dipping a pin into that thimble of liquid and letting a tiny little drop come off. Okay, so having 20 people over on one and 10, 15 over on another is a big deal for me. So I do appreciate everybody coming to watch this and get involved with the conversation, which is cool. We're going to go into a little bit of history here. Now, I am no history buff, all right? But I did a wee bit of research and I tried to tell it as a story on my Wednesday video about the Darien scheme and the Treaty of the Union and everything that happened. So please forgive me if I get a date wrong. Just tell me if a date's wrong or something. I'd rather be accurate, and that's my disclaimer going just now for it all. So let's get on with this third little segment. The Treaty of the Union was never a union of equals. It was not a noble coming together of two proud nations for shared prosperity. It was a forced agreement, born out of desperation, coercion, and betrayal. Scotland was cornered, manipulated and exploited by England at every turn, its sovereignty stripped away and its people betrayed by their own elites. This was no partnership, it was a takeover, and the scars of that exploitation remain deeply etched into Scotland's history to this day. At the dawn of the 18th century, Scotland stood on the brink of crisis. The Darien scheme, Scotland's bold attempt to establish a trading colony in Panama, had promised prosperity and independence. It was financed by nearly a quarter of Scotland's entire wealth, with thousands of ordinary Scots, from small landowners to nobles, pouring their savings into the venture. But instead of success, Darien became a tragedy. Poor planning, rampant disease and Spanish hostility doomed the colony. Many perished from starvation and illness, and those who survived returned home to a nation devastated by financial ruin. But this failure wasn't just bad luck. England's hand was all over Darien's demise. The East India Company, fearing competition, lobbied aggressively against the scheme. King William III, ruling both England and Scotland, forbade English colonies and allies from offering Scotland aid. Did you hear that? King William III, ruling both England and Scotland, he was the King of England and Scotland, told English colonies not to help another country that he was king of. What the fuck? Through the Navigation Acts, England classified Scotland as a foreign nation, cutting off access to essential trade routes. Scotland was left isolated, sabotaged by the very monarch and system it was supposed to trust. In the aftermath, Scotland was broken. Famine gripped the land, investors were ruined, and the national economy teetered on collapse. England saw this weakness and exploited it with ruthless precision. The Alien Act of 1705 was economic blackmail, threatening to bar Scots from English markets and their key exports like cattle, coal, linen. England's message was clear: accept the Union or face economic ruin. And the negotiations for the treaty were far from fair. Bribes flowed freely. Scottish nobles, many ruined from the Darien disaster, were offered pensions, cash and positions of influence in the new British state. These elites sold Scotland's sovereignty for personal gain, betraying their nation. Meanwhile, ordinary Scots in the streets, rioting. In Edinburgh and in Glasgow, their cries ignored by those who saw their own fortunes tied to England's power. England's military presence loomed large over the negotiations. Troops were stationed along the borders and naval forces were anchored in the Firth of Forth, ready to enforce compliance. This wasn't a unification born of respect. It was submission under threat. And once the treaty was signed, England wasted no time consolidating its control. Scottish military forces were absorbed into the English army, stripping away Scotland's ability to defend herself. Roads and forts were built not to unify, but to dominate. These roads would later become the tools of the Highland clearances, a systematic campaign to empty the Highlands for English landlords and sheep farming. Scottish nobles, the first Unionists, yeah, I said it, the Scottish nobles at that time, they were the first Unionists in Scotland, profited from this, leasing lands and displacing their own people. This was not progress. This was oppression. The Treaty of the Union was no partnership. It was a conquest achieved through manipulation and military force, with a legacy of exploitation that has left Scotland diminished. And yet, some still defend this betrayal. To those Scots that do, I ask, how can you accept a union built on coercion, blackmail and the suffering of your own people? The union has always served one purpose: benefit England at Scotland's expense. It's time that we confronted that truth. The union was never about equality. It was always about domination.
The Treaty of Union was never about partnership. It was a calculated act of domination. Scotland, weakened by the Darien disaster and economic despair, was coerced into submission through bribes, blackmail, and military intimidation. England exploited our desperation, using threats like the Alien Act to force compliance, while Scottish elites betrayed their people for personal gain. This so-called union stripped Scotland of its sovereignty, dismantled our military, and built roads and forts, not for unity, but for control. These very tools of domination paved the way for atrocities like the Highland clearances, where Scots were displaced for English profit. The Union has always served England's interests at Scotland's expense, leaving behind a legacy of oppression and betrayal. How can we continue to defend a system born of coercion and sustained by exploitation? How much longer will we accept a union that sacrifices Scotland's dignity and future?
See, when I first started looking at our history, I never knew nothing about the Wade roads. Was it General Wade? It was from another TikTok video that I watched that there was like talk of these military roads, and I'm like, what? military roads and military bridges. Wait a minute. So then I started looking at it and then found out that, there was English forces on the stationed right along the border, not like a big line of them, but at forts along the border, different points, on the road system that would come into Scotland ready to invade. That the Royal Navy was stationed off the coast in the Firth of Forth, ready to come into Edinburgh. Wow. Can you imagine if this was taught in Scottish schools as part of our history? The kids would be sitting there going, wait a minute, what? They did what? And this is the sort of message we need to put out there. I don't even think, I don't know whether my mum's watching this, but she's sometimes quite surprised when she sees some of my videos and then she goes and looks at the links that I send her and things. And I didn't know this, she says, I didn't know this. And then there's other things that she does know, but it surprises me as well that there's so many people of the younger generation, my generation and my mum's generation, that don't know these things. And I think it's important that we do tell the message. And it goes back to what I was saying right at the start, by sharing the work, sharing everybody's work, everybody that you consider to be a pertinent independence creator. Just go to the YouTube channel. Every single one of my videos that I make is on there and on TikTok, and I post them on the Facebook page as well. So just go and share them. If there's one that you particularly like, share it more than once. Share it at the start of the week and share it at the end of the week. The more people that get to learn this through digital means, the more people will come to the movement in a positive way. They'll see it as a national cause as opposed to a political policy. They'll kind of dissolve these yellow-blue boundaries that we put ourselves in between political parties and start seeing it as a necessity as opposed to anything else than a political cause. Brilliant. Okay, let's have a wee look. I need to figure out how to do moderators for YouTube. I know I can do managers, but Mad Monk, I've seen what you're saying there about moderation on another channel. But we'll maybe somebody can show me how to do that. Maybe there's a way I can do it. I'm not going to play about with it just now because we're doing the live. Across in TikTok land, wow, we've just hit our record of 10,300 likes. That's amazing, guys. Thank you. Keep hitting that button, keep sharing it out to people as well. The more people that get an opportunity to come into this, the better, which is tremendous. Okay, we're on to segment 4. Now, this was something that I got given last Friday by one of my YouTube people. It was a document from, is it somebody Jappy? Somebody that's written about the Scottish economy and things before. And this was kind of written a wee while back, and it talks about a particular period in Scottish history before the year 2000. I've kind of adapted it a little bit, changed the word, and I'm not reading this word for word. I kind of turned it into my script for this segment. But it's interesting to see how we've talked about at the very start, we talked about the McCrone Report and how Scotland's wealth was hidden from us for 30 years, that oil wealth. Then we talked a little bit more about Westminster austerity, how it actually affects us. We've looked at the history of when the union started, and everything kind of points to the simple fact that we have been exploited. I mean, I suppose you could turn around and argue and say, hey, well, if it wasn't for the union, you wouldn't have this, this and this. Absolutely. And, the union's not all bad. Just making sure nobody's around me actually hearing me say that. My kids would kill me. What goods come from the union? We've got a king. I've got a great flag. And I learned how to be sarcastic at school as well. Yeah, okay, let's talk about this little segment that was handed to me last week, okay? So how much longer must we endure the lies of a union that exploits us while branding us too weak, too small, and too poor to stand on our own? If Scotland is truly such a burden, why does Westminster cling so desperately to us? Why do they suppress the truth of our wealth while draining our resources to prop up a system designed for their benefit and not ours? These aren't just political questions. They're questions of justice, dignity. They're questions of survival. In 1968, a civil servant uncovered a damning truth buried within Westminster's Treasury records. Scotland wasn't a burden on the UK economy. It was quite the opposite. Even before North Sea oil was factored in, Scotland had been contributing more to the UK Treasury than it received in return. But instead of acknowledging this, Westminster buried the truth, afraid it would fuel Scotland's growing demand for independence. The deception continued for decades. In 1997, Treasury Minister William Waldegrave was forced to admit this in Parliament, that since 1979, Scotland had contributed 27 billion more to the UK Exchequer than it had ever received in return. That's £5,400 from every single Scot, money siphoned away to fund Westminster's priorities, while Scotland's needs were ignored. This revelation could have shattered the myth of Scotland's dependency, but the union-controlled media buried the story, ensuring that the lie lived on. The following year, a report from the House of Commons Library ranked Scotland 7th in the world for GDP per capita, while the UK languished in 17th place. It was undeniable. Scotland was not poor. It was wealthy, but its wealth was being drained to mask Westminster's economic failures. The North Sea oil boom is perhaps the most blatant example of this exploitation. Norway used its oil revenues, established a sovereign wealth fund, now worth over $1 trillion. Westminster squandered Scotland's with $300 billion windfall on propping up its failing economy. Scotland's wealth was treated as Westminster's lifeline, and the theft didn't end there. By 2006, Scotland was running an annual budget surplus of $2.8 billion. That's in the time of devolution, while the UK as a whole faced a deficit of $34.8 billion. But the lie persists more. Scotland was supposedly dependent, incapable of surviving without Westminster's generosity. But we've got the flag and the king, remember that. The truth was clear. Scotland was subsidising the Union, not the other way around. Even today, Westminster exploits Scotland's resources while ignoring its potential. Our renewable energy exports 24% of its surplus electricity to England, yet Scottish producers face unfair grid charges. And we're going to be probably sending it all down to Englandshire very soon because of those 4 wonderful big cables being built down the east coast of Scotland to basically pump all of our renewable energy down south. And then that hits the national grid, it flows back up to us at inflated prices. What was ours becomes theirs, and they sell it back to us. Our whisky industry, with exports skyrocketing to markets like China, is dismissed as a minor contributor, and the untapped oil fields west of Shetland, worth an estimated $1 trillion, remain under Westminster's control. This is not partnership. This is plunder. And yet Westminster doesn't just steal Scotland's wealth, it manipulates its people through fear-mongering, distortions and a compliant media. They perpetuate the myth of dependency. They ignore facts, twist figures, and dismiss Scotland's potential, all to maintain control. The comparison to Norway is damning. Both nations discovered oil in the North Sea, but while Norway prospered, Scotland was exploited. Norway's wealth now secures its future, while Scotland's was just whisked away to sustain Westminster's economic failures. The question isn't whether Scotland can afford to be independent, and we have asked this many times. The question is, how much longer can Scotland afford to remain part of this union? How much longer will the Scots that voted no be happy to give everything over to a country that does not appreciate it at all? This is not a political choice. It's an economic necessity. It is a national cause. And it's time that we took back what was rightfully ours.
Scotland has never been the burden Westminster claims. For decades, the truth has been suppressed, with Scotland contributing billions more to the UK Treasury than it receives in return. In 1997, it was revealed that every Scot had effectively subsidised Westminster by £5,400 since 1979. Meanwhile, Norway, discovering oil at the same time, built a sovereign wealth fund now worth over $1 trillion. Scotland's £300 billion in oil revenue was squandered to prop up a failing union, leaving Scots with crumbling infrastructure and stolen opportunities. Even today, our renewable energy exports, whiskey industry, and untapped oil fields are exploited, while our people are told we're too poor to manage on our own. This is not partnership, it's plunder. Westminster manipulates the narrative to maintain control, but the facts are clear. Scotland is subsidizing the Union. How much longer will we let Westminster rob us of our wealth and our future?
Couple of interesting conversations going on. Milk Chews, I'm going to come to yourself there about the SNP flundering and Alba non-entity part in just a wee second. Mark, look at our great history together, World War I and World War II. We stood together and defended our freedom. We would do that anyway, would we not? You know, that was then, this is now. Whatever, we have to understand that we're kind of symbiotic because we live on this island, but we should be allowed to make our own decisions. We're a country, we're a sovereign people. We should be in charge of our own resources. We should have those own resources to benefit our people. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't trade freely. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't trade fairly with our brothers and sisters down south. And incidentally, you've also said there I should head down, I don't know whether it was directed at me, I should head to England and hug these people because they're our friends. My dad's English. He's a proper East End Cockney wanker. I love him. And I hug him all the time. He's a good guy. He has two brothers, one of them's passed away, God rest his soul, that live down in Cockney land in London. Uncle Danny, who's still alive, I absolutely adore that man. But they understand how I feel. They might not like it, but they understand how I feel. You know? Yeah. So yeah, right. Milk Chews, how do we recapture the advance of independence with SNP floundering and the ALPA non-entity? We remove ourselves from the addiction to politics. Politics has to become a tool. This is a constant theme through a lot of the stuff that I write about, a lot of the stuff when I make videos, right? Politics is not the way to deliver independence. Independence will only come if the people of Scotland want it, and it's round about 50-50 in the polls just now. Incidentally, if we were to start an independence campaign tomorrow at 50-50, I would take that. And I would be live every single night talking about the good things, our Yes To campaign, and then pointing out all the scare tactics from 2014 and all the new scare tactics of better together again. Because that's how I kind of see how they'll go. But what could they actually, market themselves on? You know, there's nothing. You sell weapons to Ukraine and they fire ballistic missiles at Russia, painting a target on the UK. We supply weapons and, intelligence planes flying over Gaza to a whole country that is basically, allegedly, are performing a genocide. It's awful, Awful. So what do we do to make that push that forward? We share people's work. We work together. We push past and ignore, I hate to say this, that divide of yellow and blue, the yellow of the SNP and the blue of ALPA. There's a bit of a toxic relationship between certain supporters within these organisations that can't stand each other. Okay? Now, there's a whole aspect of good people as well that would quite happily get along well. And then I would say the silent majority of Scots who are pro-independence that don't really care, that just want to vote yes when the opportunity comes along. We need to attend marches. We need to, like I say, share work. We need to rub shoulders with all the people that are positive and ignore all the nonsense and rhetoric about SNP bad, Alapa bad, Scotland bad, everything like that. That's just something that we kind of need to do. It's kind of frightening. Let me just bring up the marches. I've got the marches, dates and things for, where did I put it? For all under one banner. This is next year's marches. Okay, so you've got Glasgow, Saturday the 3rd of May, Stirling, Saturday the 21st of June, and Edinburgh, Saturday the 6th of September. Do you know what would be really good is to see as many of those people, many of you guys there as possible. I've already booked those days off. I am going to every single one of the marches next year, without a doubt. I'm not going to miss one of them. I don't care about the weather and all that. You know, it's very, very important that we get there. I don't know what the speakers will be like. I don't know whether they'll be inspiring and positive, trying to blur the lines between political demonstrations and things. Listen, last week in the videos and stuff, I talked about how there should be 3 pillars of independence. It's something that I feel very strongly about. The first one is having a very strong political presence. We need that. We do need that. They are our means of expressing our self-determination by putting a cross in a box. Okay? But so many people are caught up in traditional politics with it. We need to move past that and actually turn Holyrood into a Scottish parliament. Right now, it is a unionist parliament, even though we have a Scottish National Party government in place. Okay? Why is it a unionist government there, Holyrood? Because the Tories, Labour, and the Liberal Democrats are all the same parties that are out of Westminster. They will never put Scotland first. Never put Scotland first. Even if Anna Sarwar turns around and says, hey, Scottish Labour will give you back that winter fuel thing. Bullshit. Utter nonsense. His bosses down south would not allow that. Okay, incidentally, it's coming to Scotland anyway. It's part of Scotland. And I'm pretty sure that eventually it will become a universal benefit again. It's just that I don't think it would work. What would be the next thing? So building a pro-Scottish parliament. So we need to use and understand the D'Hondt system. We need to understand the additional member system, is how that actually votes. How your first vote is always for the constituencies. Your second vote is for a list. And if you actually vote on the list for a party that doesn't have any constituency seats, it has more power. It really does. We're going to be talking about that again next week. It's something that I need to keep talking about as we go along. All right. Second pillar is we need a strong international team that's going out speaking to the EU, speaking to the UN, speaking to pretty much everybody. And we kind of got that just now, because you've got Salvo and Liberation Scot who want to use our old constitution and our old claim of right, and that all that's good stuff from our past to demonstrate that Scotland still has a right to choose and to show that we're being exploited. Okay, and I'm pretty sure they've got all the signatures they need now to be an official liberation movement in the eyes of the UN. So that's an interesting thing, that it's already in place. So we need to encourage them to do that and kind of maybe say, look, leave the politics of the politicians. We're going to vote for a Scottish government through the constituencies and more of a Scottish opposition for to be in Holyrood, to push out the unionists. This is my strategy anyway. International group. And then finally, it's you guys. you amazingly wonderful people that are out there in the grassroots movement, between now and Holyrood 2026, share the work. Speak to people, have those conversations that you would do to build a better Scotland. I'll play a wee jingle in a second. In fact, we'll play it now. Let's play Kareem's jingle for Building a Better Scotland.
My name is Kareem, and I want to build a better Scotland by progress with a well-being economy, so everyone in our land can live in dignity and security. What would you do to build a better Scotland?
What would you do to build a better Scotland? Okay, is that not what the whole goal is? Is to build a better Scotland, to make people better, to make people's lives better. For me, I've got a jingle with me, and I've got about 4 or 5 Saorsa people that have made jingles like that about building a better Scotland. And I think it's important that we have that idea. That's the national conversation that we need to have. Like, if you could do one thing, wave a magic wand, right, that is not political, nothing political at all, what would you want to introduce into Scotland? Now, if Lisa's still watching, did you not say you wanted to have a water park in Scotland? Just looking in TikTok land to see if she's still there. I'm sure you did. Just so you know, Centre Parks have just announced, yeah, that was you, I could see you, brilliant. Centre Parks have just announced that they're building one on the Borders. A Centre Parks there. So you're going to get that beforehand, but we need one on the east coast as well. A wee bit further up, near St Andrews or something. Okay? But no, anything at all. Mine is, I want a transport infrastructure that is the envy of the world. I want to get from Edinburgh, where I live, up to Thurso and to Orkney within 4 or 5 hours. I love Orkney. Love that part of the world. So I would love to be able to go up there for a weekend without being knackered from driving like 8 hours to get to the north of Scotland. All these things. This is really important that we remove ourselves from politics and dream big and think what we could do in an independent Scotland. These are the conversations that you guys as the grassroots pillar should be having. Not about, John Swinney's a representative of the British state. He's compromised. What does that do for the independence movement? Nothing at all. Oh, the SNP have got all this money squared and hidden away. Oh, Alapa are full of toxic, transphobic people. No, these are not the conversations that we should be having. They're all political bullshit and personal opinion that basically just drives a wedge between the Scottish people. You guys are great. You guys are better than bringing us. We're not good at maybe getting a positive message out there, but we try to do that and get it out there better. So ask somebody if you were living in a Scotland that was independent, that had all its own resources, and you had an unlimited budget and could wave a magic wand and it could happen tomorrow, what would you put into Scotland to make it better? Nothing political. That's the only condition. Nothing political. Start having those conversations. Start having them on Monday morning with your colleagues at work, when you go for a coffee, when you see your friends over the weekend. That's the conversation that we should be having. Those are the words that we need to be sharing. And that's kind of where we are. I'm going to bring up the all under one banner thing again for people. Where is it? There it is. Okay, so marches. Get those dates in your diary, all right? Get those dates in your diary. Get those weekends marked off, all right? And if anybody is going to go, listen, I would love to hang out with some of yous during that. Have a wee coffee on the green while we listen to the people speaking. Hopefully, like I say, we have people speaking that are inspiring, that blur the lines away from politics and point outwards with their energy instead of inwards. We need that energy going out to the rest of Scotland and the rest of the world and say, look, this is what we want. not pointing in the way and being accusative to your own brothers and sisters. You know? Yeah. Right. What time is it? It is 2 minutes past midnight. It is time for me to go across to Discord land and go and hang out with people. There was some people that were asking in the YouTube chat about coming into Discord. I'm quite happy for you to come into Discord, except you need to go and download the app or put it on your computer, and then you need to go and find me on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok and send me a personal message. Incidentally, if you do contact me through that way, the whole reason that I'm asking to do that is so we can check you out. I'll be above board and honest with you about this. If I go to your account and you're not pro-independence, you will not get in to the Discord. I'm the only person that holds the keys to that kingdom, and I am an absolute control freak when it comes to it, because it's a safe space for all independent supporters to come and talk freely. We've got independence only channels, and we've got channels where we just talk utter garbage and people take the piss out of me, and I'm happy with that. Okay, happy with that. So if you do want to join, it has to be through social media. You have to contact me privately, and you have to download it, and you have to have an account that can be verified and seen as a pro-indie account. I think that's fair. Okay, so let's call it a night, shall we? And next week, I did see somebody talk about voting reform in TikTok land. That's what next week's going to be about, because there's been a couple of polls that have come out saying that reform may end up gaining 12 seats in the Scottish Parliament. Can anybody stomach that? Can you imagine Nigel Farage as the leader of Reform UK and that particular unionist party being part of the Scottish Parliament? That should frighten everybody. So we're going to look at what they stand for. We're going to look at their policies. We're going to look at their history. We're going to look at their members. We're going to look at the fact that they had ghost candidates up here. We're then going to look at the polls and see how it would work for it all, and then talk about the additional member system again. And that way I can have a little chat about voting strategies as well, and how we could probably, if we were to rise above our political allegiances, we could deliver a pro-Scottish Parliament for the government. It might not be a majority, but then we could also put a whole bunch of MSPs that are pro-Scotland, pro-independence into the opposition to work with the government. I would rather have the SNP speaking to ALAPA and ISPs and Green candidates, MSPs in opposition, working together, basically pushing policies for Scotland and pushing the boundaries of devolution. You do that and you can say to the world, hey look, we've got a majority of MSPs that are pro-Scottish sitting in the Scottish Parliament. We have people internationally talking about it, and look at our grassroots. We're all focused on the one goal of independence. Is that not what it's about? Is that not what we're supposed to be about? Listen, thank you very much everybody for taking the time to be here today. Very successful YouTube chat going on there. Thank you everybody in YouTube. Thank you everybody across in TikTok land. Please don't forget to share this out. Don't forget to share the work, and always share every strong-hearted believer in independence creators' work out there, whether it be on TikTok, whether it be on Blue Sky, whether it be on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Just go and do it. We have a private Facebook group anybody can join, just to answer the questions, and we have a Facebook page as well. Go and find us. Be part of this journey. Be part of the community. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next week.
I'll reach my hands out in